Alrighty, welcome to week 2 in CIT84 Node.js, 100% online, 9 weeks. I know, you've heard it, right? But do you get it? Do you get how fast this class is going to move? So that's my first piece of advice for this week's attendance is staying up to date and catching ahead or getting ahead, catching ahead. That's horrible. Is a good idea. So working ahead is a great idea because we, in addition to, like, there's 3 parts of this class: learn together, code ups, and code reviews, which really come from you creating something in our dev projects. So our first one, matter of fact, let's just look, right? So here we are at week 2. We're going to finish all the way through section 4. Half of section 4, and then we'll finish section 5. And actually, I believe, and let me go check real quick, because section 5, debugging, before we start into 6, we're going to take what you have learned in these other sections and create your first app based on your concept. And I have, in this week's work, ask you, and what I mean by this week's work is this week's Learn Together, to actually come up with this concept of what you're going to create. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be anything really sophisticated. It needs to be more sophisticated than the Notes app. But you're basically gathering some information from, in this case, the command line, and you're going to be writing the data that you're getting into a JSON file, which for those of you that took 93, this is simpler than doing it into local storage, but it's still the basic same idea. So for those of you that took 93, I want you to know, I do want you to create something different. Okay, so if you turned in a Develop It 2 in 93, I want you to do something different for this class. So you will see in this week's Learn Together, I'm going to have us all create an email, right? Email app idea. So you need to come, and again, think about, right? I mean, there's so many things and everything we could probably talk about as related to technology. Almost everything is you're giving some data, right? That then is stored and it gives you information back. So what we're going to do is something similar based on something you would like to create. So it's a balance of also wanting to implement your ideas based on your skill level as well, right? So I'm just giving you the heads up. So the reason I was saying that is right here in the 4th week. So we're coming into the 2nd week. So counting this week, 2, 3, 4, there's really only 3 weeks away. So keep that in mind. Ask me any questions. I talk about this topic related to this in the Learn Together for this week as well. Okay, so here's what I want to talk about in addition to that topic. First, just to kind of give you the heads up, for those who don't know, I grade each morning, schedule permitting. So even though something's due the night before, as long as it's submitted by the time I go to grade the next morning, and that specifically refers to the mornings after a due date, but I actually grade each day. As long as it's there on those mornings that are after the due date, when I go to grade, I don't consider it late. But if it is submitted after I grade, and the way you know I've graded is if you didn't submit it, it's a 0. So do know that for this class, you can submit work after the due date. It is discounted 25%. Okay, so just FYI, just so you understand that part of it. And I would recommend, even though I give attendance for a week, right? So you have, today is Friday of week 1. You have until the following Friday at noon to do attendance. I recommend doing attendance sooner in the week versus later. Okay. So the thing I'm going to leave you with today is something that I in the first week's setup, that first item due, I talked about a topic that I noticed a couple of you didn't get done. So I want to show you, let's see, do I have my editor open? I don't. Let me go ahead and let me start up my editor while I'm talking about this. And what this is the git ignore file. So there's a git ignore file that you should have created. If you didn't, you can create it now. And it should be setting in your root of each repo, okay? So, oh, and look, I can do it to this one actually, right? So, and actually let me find one so you can see this as well. In addition to the items here for VS Code, so it doesn't track them, and that's what the git ignore does. It says ignore the following file types. The important one, especially as we're building these things that we're going to be looking at, is actually going to be, oh, this is for my other class. This is for my machine learning class, but that node modules is actually the one I'm talking about. And the reason that's important is that we're all going to be installing. And by the way, I think it's really helpful if you have set up the directory the way I recommend them. But, you know, I can't see your local system, so I can't really know for sure how you set it up. But it is important that you have set up this git ignore file to exclude, and that's what this does. Actually, I did a little research. I remember playing with this one, and by putting 2 stars instead of just 1, it actually excludes recursively through the subdirectories. So make sure that you do this. And the reason is when you push your code, this is how to know if you have it in place. When you push your code after installing the first module, right? And you'll do this in the Node course, and then you'll do this for when you create next week's Learn Together. When you're installing these Node modules locally, you should not be pushing that stuff to GitHub. And that's just kind of the best practice because we also learned this week based on the course is that package.json is really there to keep track of whatever we've installed. So by doing that, if somebody happens to, and Andrew shows this in the course, is if you happen to delete this directory, you can just recreate it. So make sure that in your git ignore for the repos you have in there, and again, I like to do it this way so it's recursive because in this case, you're going to have several instances of subdirectories that would have node modules in them. Okay, so make sure that's there. If you don't have a git ignore, create one. Make sure that excluding node modules is there. If you want to look, let me just come back here. If you want to do a little searching about how that thing should be set up, I tell you what I'll do before I post attendance today, I'll go out and find a reference as well that talks about this. So we're coming into week 2. There's some really good content that we're going to be doing. So let me just end with this, okay? If you're thinking about what you're going to create, what you're going to develop for this course, and you do it twice, and remember, you got to come see me either virtually or in person, so I'll have schedules on that soon. I want you to be thinking about the progression of where we're heading. So for the first sections of courses, we're going to actually just be learning some basic node modules, setup, yargs, how to do command line arguments, and really how to write some node code, which is really just JavaScript, which, by the way, is really just C++, but that's under the hood. We're not writing that. We're writing JS that is actually being interpreted by the C++ interpreter. But let me go back to my concept. Is that so once we finish the Note app, we're then going to learn how to make API calls asynchronously, okay? What that means is that when you do things like making a call, calling an API or referencing an API and getting some data back, there's a delay there very often because you're making a network request and you need to be able to handle that The way he's going to show you how to do it is with something called callbacks. So the reason he's doing this is A, to give you the experience for how to do it, but also introducing, if you haven't dealt with it, the idea of APIs. And there are so many, and much of development these days is actually either calling APIs and getting data back or creating them yourself. So that is actually what happens in this course. Once we finish calling APIs that exist out there on the web, then we'll actually go through the process of learning Express, how to create the server, and then how to ultimately create an API. And at the end of this course, we'll take whatever you've created and then wrap it in a login process. So the thing I want you to think about is that what you're building for this first develop it project, right? In week 4. Did we say that? Yeah, in week 4 is ultimately also what you'll take into the last develop it that you'll create an API for. So by that time, you're going to have a better idea of what that is. But even if you're just thinking about a traditional app that you deal with every day, you're going to be thinking about it in terms of the front end, what you interface with. But there's a part of that app, and in 90%, maybe 95, maybe 99% of the cases, that it is actually dealing with some back-end server by either allowing you to log in, grabbing data that's out there, okay, which these are all what Node is built to do well. So handling that back-end process for whatever kind of app there is of course a fundamental part of development. And so what you're going to be doing, again, you're going to be building this idea out in your first develop it. Then you'll be in develop it 0, and then in develop it 1 at the end of the course, you'll be actually creating an API based on this same concept. So just to help you kind of contextually understand where we're heading. Alrighty, have a great time. Your reply here, I want you to tell me, and please do, because if I see you not answering it, I'll know you didn't listen to the end, is did you set up the get ignore, and did you exclude node modules, and do you now understand why? So answer that question. Ask me any other questions you might have in attendance. Remember, attendance is open for a week. I do not count it as part of your grade, even though it shows up in the grade book. It's really just something I have to report on to the campus. All right, have a great weekend. There is a study jam down at the Hive on Tuesday night as part of the machine learning class that I'm teaching. You don't have to be in the class to come. It's at 5 to 10. There's going to be food, and we're going to give swag bags from Google away. So if you want to know about that, let me know. Have a great weekend. I'm going to be preparing for the study jam. And doing some node code. Awesome.